Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kizer Mithril, part of Kizer's X series. Easily, in my opinion, their best looking and most impressive X series knife. Now, many of you are probably like, didn't you test that here a while back and the lock failed? You're just gonna gloss over that? No. Actually, I told Kizer, I made a big deal out of it, along with a whole bunch of other knives that, weren't doing so hot in the lock solidity department. But Kizer reached out to me actually and said, they're definitely not supposed to disengage that easily. Send those back and we will send you replacements where the lock is as sturdy as it is supposed to be. And I said, sure, but I'm still going to test them. And they said, no problem. I got them. Tested them. Actually, there is an upload. It's in the same unboxing playlist. I think it says something about Kizer and redemption in it. And they did. They survived the exact same type of test, right? And that's good because not only should they, what I do is not a spine whack test. It's more of a spine light tap test, which I will continue to beat. That dead horse is definitely going to continue to get beaten because there's no shortage of people complaining about my incredibly brutal and unrealistic spine whack test. No, it's very, very simple and any lock should be able to stand up to it. But Kizer's claimed superior button lock, this is a plunge lock that's claimed to be beefed up from a standard plunge lock, right? Could not survive this while a standard Civivi, which I used as an example, Civivi plunge lock could stand up to it, no problem. So, like I said, Kizer said it's definitely supposed to be stronger than that. We'll send you some new ones, and they did, and that's great. We're still going to talk about that, though. The rest of this knife, very, very impressive. Expensive. Is it worth the price tag? We'll get to that. I'll link everything down in the description so you guys can check it out. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Make sure your notifications are turned on for the Metal Complex YouTube channel. All right, let's go ahead and measure this knife. The Mithril, not a small knife. Overall length, 8 inches, definitely full size. Blade length, 3.5. Cutting edge, 3.35. Let's do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others, up against my own Excalibur, full size and compact. Full size a little bigger, not massively bigger. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Mithril definitely about the same size as the PM2 with more cutting edge. And finally, the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How is the action? Are Kizer X Series knives really superior in the action department versus standard Kizers? This one, yes, and many that I have handled, yes, not all of them, but there is definitely a noticeable difference in terms of just the pivot action and the way that everything feels, the weight. They must take some extra care to machine the internals. And I would imagine, there's a lot of things contributing to the cost here. I think a lot of people will wave off some things that should be really obvious contributors to the price tag. They'll wave it off and say it's a Kizer, so it shouldn't cost more than X amount. No, that's not how that works. Anybody who puts more effort, more time into their quality control or their final product, those elements absolutely cost more money to do because we don't live in the same world as Harry Potter. We can't just use magic to make things the way that we want them to, or the way that we perceive them to be. Absolutely, there is a difference here, and this difference absolutely will add to the cost. It feels really good. Not everybody likes these thumb discs. I used to hate them, but I found that, when they're placed correctly, it's actually pretty easy to deploy the knife. The other thing that's really impressive here is that this plunge lock, which truthfully, I wish it was just a different locking system. But it is the detent. This is not a button-operated liner lock or top liner lock or compression lock, which is confusing because it should be. It's a plunge lock, and that means that the plunge lock acts as the detent because there is no detent ball. Pretty impressive, honestly. A really nice feeling plunge detent, and the release, the break of the detent also feels good. A lot of weight in that blade, but enough detent that you can really throw it, and you can do it pretty easily. You can also just wheel it out if you want to. Pushing the button, it does take a ways of depression before it'll actually disengage, which is good. There should be a decent amount of travel on a beefed up, compression lock, so that you're not just like tapping it, or so you don't just run it into something lightly and it disengages. I think it's a combination of geometry and just a total amount of lock surface area that's lacking in a lot of these plunge locks, and the nature of the lock itself, which is causing them to disengage more often than other locking systems. But, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I really do think that this is beefier than a standard plunge lock or like anything that like Civivi's offering. I have no idea. I don't know what the real differences are, especially after that first couple that I had. Not one, but two Mithrils failing. So, yeah, but it does feel like it has a ways to travel, and it did stand up to my little tiny tickle test. So it's good enough for me. But you will have to push it, I think, a little bit further than a lot of other standard plunge locks. Not a lot, just a little bit. Once you get used to it, you're good, and the pivot action is phenomenal. Very, very good. Carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's maybe a hair thicker, not much. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is actually a fairly compact, full-size knife. It's just, it's full titanium, so you're going to be carrying around a little bit of heft there. Let's go ahead and talk about heft. We are looking at, for materials, a compound DLC M390 blade that they claim is hardened to 60 to 62. If that's actually the case, nice work, Kizer. I would like to see that tested by Taylor, and I'd like to see if it is consistent so that we can know for sure that that is the case. But if you are actually hardening your M390 to 60 to 62, I think that's awesome. Thank you for at least not advertising 59 to 61, right? But it'd be nice to know consistently, but it's nice to see Kizer trying to hit those numbers anyway. And this is an actual DLC coating, which is great. And this is a compound blade. All of these things are going to factor into cost. They're not just fluff. All of these things, doing all of these things together are going to add to the cost. We have a beautiful inlay here, this sort of like aqua or, Arctic or whatever you want to call it, carbon fiber here that's textured and nicely laid into the surrounding titanium. We have a nice little pivot collar there. We have, yes, an actual glow-in-the-dark. Let's get there we go. That little button there glows. Pretty cool. I like that. It's a nice little touch. You're not going to use it very often, but it's neat. So that's nice how they've laid that in there. It looks really, really good. Some beautiful work here back on the spine. Normally we just have two simple pieces. Maybe if we're lucky, it's got some chamfering, but nowhere near this level of detail typically, especially in a Kizer. And then we've got more detail in this floating titanium backspacer, a beautiful pocket clip. A lot of extra work here. Very clearly, this should be very clear to everyone who is familiar with Kizer. There is way more effort in this one than your typical Kizer knife. And I can't say that that's always felt the case for the Kizer X series, but the Mithril really feels like they tried. And that's cool. I like that. If you're going to have like a mega premium tier beyond your normal premium stuff, there better be some extra. You better be laying the sauce on thick, right? And I think they did. I think this thing is drenched in sauce. It's got a little weird there. But anyways, you do have weight reduction, obviously, for the pockets that are meant for the carbon fiber. But then on the inside, there's actually additional weight reduction. So it still doesn't feel insanely lightweight. I'm going to say that this guy probably comes in at right around like 4.5 ounces. I'd be kind of surprised if it came in over 5, but let's see. Not even 4. 3.9 ounces. That's very impressive. Very impressive. So a 3.5 inch blade, 3.9 ounces of weight, and your balance is actually right behind the pivot, which is very good. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. Sorry, this is the stuff that we're talking about here. I just was doing that off camera like an idiot. We have T8 for the pivot. We have T8 for the body screw. We have a hidden pocket clip screw underneath there, but just one screw on this side, and then it looks like it actually threads all the way through, which is nice. Extremely minimal hardware because these are floating pins. That's awesome. Just a couple things to take out and you're good, and they're T8. Phenomenal. These are little quality of life improvements that you can, that designers can add to their knives to just make it that much less intimidating to take apart and that much easier to put back together. Nice work. That's going to be it for the hardware check. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness. I don't think it's a super thick blade, but it's also not an incredibly thin blade. Probably in middle of the road. I'd guess maybe 125, 130. Come on, zero out. There we go. Okay. So we are, it's a little more than that, 137,000. Okay, right. Still just a little thicker than middle of the road. Meat and potatoes time. I understand that, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's something about classic straight knife lines that just work. A nice, not quite, but close to 1-to-1 ratio for blade length to handle length. We have that classic knife handle. It's almost, I hate to give it to Terzwola, but it looks like the Terzwola handle, kind of. But it's pretty much every good utilitarian folder is going to have a similar handle shape. And, the end result is that this has phenomenal ergonomics. It feels so good. You can choke up here, but this is the way that it feels best. Man, that pocket clip is cozy. When they designed that thing, they made sure they gave you a little curvature there and a nice little, almost like a little lazy boy for the palm or the pad of your finger. I can't even tell. I can barely tell that clip is there. It's so comfortable. Obviously, this is not a symmetrical clip, so it can't be flipped over to the other side. Like lefties, you're getting left out here, is what I'm trying to say. That's a bummer. Compound blade, pros and cons. This is a compound tanto, which means you will be sharpening two separate edges. You'll have to adjust if you have a guided system. If you don't, good luck maintaining that distinct change there. You can probably... Honestly, what I would do if I was going to use this all the time, I'd just sharpen through it. I'd make it consistent, but everybody's going to want to do it differently. The initial edge is nice and thin. It's a hollow ground initial edge, and then your secondary edge is flat ground. You're going to have to excuse any background noise because today was the last day of school, and now my kids are home for the summer. And while they'll have plenty of activities that keep them out of the house, sometimes they're going to be here and stomping around upstairs and yelling and making lots of noise, despite me telling them that I need at least a couple hours a day of quiet time. So sorry about that. Anyways, but the compound blade, yeah, some people are going to like it. Some people are not. Honestly, at this tier of pricing, the people who are actually going to consider buying it, let's say they gave you a choice of a drop point or whatever. I'm not sure how many additional people, are really going to be incredibly, that's going to be their deciding factor. Maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like at this price point, there's a lot more people who are just going to, pick this up for the combination of materials, the look, the finish, especially there's going to be a little collectability here. I think this is a limited run of 200, right? So I don't know. Compound blade, pros and cons. I think honestly, mostly cons with a compound blade. A continuous belly drop point blade is just going to serve the end user better, but it does look cool. And honestly, the blade would have less personality in contrast to the handle if they hadn't done that. So I don't know. That's really up to the end user to decide whether or not it's for them. The DLC looks amazing. They call this DLC Ultra. What's the difference between DLC Ultra and regular DLC? Apparently nothing. I can't find anything that suggests that there's anything different. It's probably a brand name of DLC. That's the best that I can tell you. It's going to have all the scratch resistance and corrosion resistance of regular DLC, and that's all that really matters. There's a couple different variations of this knife. I think there's a greenish one and an all black one. But they all look good. It just depends on which one you want. I think the color contrasting looks really, really nice there. There is nothing on the blade, nothing on this side. That was a big D move there by Kizer. Not putting logos on there, letting the blade be sterile, letting it look like a premium object. Thank you. Classy move, Kizer. Love that. Like I said, pocket clip looks good. Backspacer looks good. There's a little lanyard hole back here. This is a plunge lock, so it is completely and totally closed off back here. That's nice. We do have a stop pin in the normal position with quite a bit of shouldering. Absolutely zero blade play up, down, left to right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. Very, very smooth and consistent. Noticeably smoother than a lot of other Kizer knives I handle. And here you go again, the detent. Click into the closed position. And do we have perfect centering? We absolutely do, with no detent lash. This really is one of the nicest knives that Kizer has ever made. The base price of this knife came in at $350. Whether or not this knife is still available, I honestly have no idea. I wanted to review it because it's very likely that they'll do another Mithril run in the future, and it's like just a different color combination or maybe a different blade steel. That's the one of 200, because people are always like, why are you reviewing this knife? If they made 200 and they're all sold out. Because that's rarely how limited runs work. It means 200 for this batch, and then another batch will come, and it'll be slightly different, or it'll be the Mithril 2 or whatever. So it's worth, telling people what I think, and then they can prepare for another drop if they want to, or another batch. $350. So what are they doing with this knife that's going to make it cost more than your typical $200 full-size Chinese premium pocket knife, right? Let's start with M390. You can get M390 in the sub $100 territory. My trust in whether or not it's heat treated correctly comes down to the company who is, designed and OEM the knife. And very few companies that are selling knives in M390 under $200 are actually heat treating it where it should be, which in my opinion is 60 plus, right? If Kizer's actually getting it there, that's great. You're already gonna be better there, right? So we're comparing this to like your typical $200 competitor. On top of that, we have an inlay right away. The fact that there is an inlay is gonna bump the price up. Not just any inlay though. This is a really nice piece of carbon fiber and it's textured. The inlay work is also pretty nuts. I mean, that's nice. This is definitely a bump up in cost. I think that right there pushes it up over the $250 competitive zone. On top of that, we have both DLC and a compound blade. Given the fact that we've got texturing here, and we also have the pivot collar, the little glowy button, right? And again, people will try to value this as whether or not they care about those elements. That's personal value, which is different than how we judge it against competition. Is it actually justified in the price zone that it's placed in, right? Your personal value is separate than that. The fact that you might not need the glowy button or the compound blade does not actually affect the cost of creating a knife with these elements. We still have to consider it, right, when we're judging the final price tag. So anyways, the combination of all those things, we have M390, presumably heat treated to 60 to 62 HRC, a compound DLC blade with phenomenal fit and finish. Absolutely wonderful piece of material here laid into the titanium. Looks nice and is textured. Pivot collar. We have the little glow ring or the little glow button. That's nice. We have a titanium backspacer. We have a lot of additional milling right here just for some designy stuff there on the spine. A really nice milled clip. Yeah, this does push this knife up into that over $300 category. There's a lot of really great competition. We are in Kunwu territory for like top-end Kunwu stuff. And I gotta say, I mean, maybe I'm a little biased, people say, oh, well, they make your knife, you're gonna be biased. They make my knife because I chose them to make my knife. I remind people of this. I had any choice I wanted. There were tons of companies reaching out. We'll make your model. If you really want to bring that to life, we'll make it. I chose Kunwu. It's the only company that I was, because the project was, no, it's not going to happen. And then Kunwu, with their quality, convinced me, right? So you can call that a bias, but in reality, Kunwu really just does make incredible products. If I were to compare this to what Kunwu typically offers between $300 and $350, I would still say Kunwu is doing a better job all the way around, especially in terms of value, like the money for what you're getting. But this is really good. Really good. I'm not going to complain too much. $350. I don't know. If I were to price this out, if I were to say, I wonder what this is priced at, here's what I think, I'd say $325. Okay. So, and like, there's a little bit of like arbitrary, there's always a little bit of like, a little bit of feeling in there, right? A little bit of like, $350. I'm not upset about that. I think the Kizer Mithril is really nice. It's not a knife that's going to be for everybody, but for the people who do spend the money on it and kind of approach it the way that it's meant to be. I mean, like, this is a collectible, premium knife that is going to appeal to the enthusiast who still might want to carry the thing. And if that's you, yes, wonderful. You're going to absolutely love this, right? So to those people, I'd recommend it, but obviously, not to everybody. Generally speaking, though, for people shopping at this price point between $300 and $350, this is a recommendable knife for those people. So not everybody. I'm not recommending this to everybody. I'm recommending this to people who are shopping in that territory, but this is about the top end. If this was priced much higher, I would say you need to be bringing something else here. But this is pretty darn good. I like it. I'm happy to give this a positive review. I really wanted to. And I was so bummed out that those first ones failed. But we do need to talk about this. There's going to be a whole bunch of people who are too lazy to get to the end of the video, and they're going to say, oh, you just give it a free pass because you tested 2 of them and they worked fine, right? You tested 2 that failed. So you're a shill, or whatever people say, right? Whatever people say. So I have to assume that Kizer was telling the truth when they said, this is not how the lock is supposed to behave, right? These were bad ones. Not only do I think that they sent me 2 good ones and then tested them, I have a feeling they're going to be making sure that the locks moving forward are going to function a lot better. If I were Kizer, knowing, right, that not everybody, but me and lots of other content creators who feel the same as me are going to test these in similar ways, if I were Kizer, or any company for that matter, I'd be making sure that they can survive at least the gentlest of tickle tap tests. That's probably the bare minimum. We do need to be making sure that these things can stand up to just a couple of light taps. And no, we're not going to reset the locks after each tap. We're not going to do that. Every now and then, I'm going to get somebody who's going to go down in the comments and say you have to do that. And to you, I'm going to say no. I'm not going to do that, and I don't think that we should. I think the locks should stand up to multiple taps because, very specifically, that does go outside of the realm of normal and natural for everyday use, and that way you can ensure that while using the knife properly in a normal and natural environment, you'll never come anywhere close to that happening in an ideal situation. You go overboard, you test a little outside, in this case, not into extreme territory, but a little outside the realm of normal. And then you can ensure that the normal use of the knife is in fact safe. Because if you test it in an absolutely perfectly natural way and reset the lock every single time, it still leaves a little bit of room for maybe given enough force, right? Which eventually there is, right? It doesn't matter how I make this argument. People are going to argue with me. So just know, it's fine. It's fine to argue. It's fine to not have the same expectations as me. It's fine to be, it doesn't make nearly any sense to be mad at me for it because the end result for everybody is that ideally all of these companies would just beef up their locking systems, right? So if you're like, no, Metal Complex, I don't want better locking systems. I want mediocre locking systems that are questionable and then I have to walk on eggshells around every time I use it. No, you need to be more scientific with your lock test. No, absolutely not. These companies absolutely should be making sure that these locking systems can stand up to the lightest, most absurdly minimal impacts, just to make sure that, the people who are buying and carrying this stuff, especially people spending, in this case, $350, can just use the thing without being like, it might disengage, right? No. I think by what a lot of people would call it, my excessive brutal testing is absolutely worth it just for peace of mind. So to those people, I respectfully request that you sit down and be quiet and just let people, feel safe and secure carrying this stuff, right? Kizer should push to make better locking systems, and we as consumers deserve to have safe and reliable locking systems when we're spending this type of money on a knife. Anyways, I like this knife. It's good. I'm going to put it in my recommended knives playlist. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. If you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.